Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here with you today, and in today's video we're going to be looking at King George V, the British Tier 7 tech tree battleship. And this is a battleship I have really enjoyed at the tier, especially when you go from the Tier 6 Queen Elizabeth up to the King George. It does feel quite different to a certain extent, and so I've just really been enjoying the King George. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at a brief overview of the ship, the upgrades, and then the captain build that I would recommend. So first, what type of battleship are we talking about here? Well, the King George V is not a brawler battleship. She plays best mid to somewhat long range, but probably best in mid-range, and then if you need to kite away or something as that example, you have fantastic HE fire setting chances with this main battery. With the King George V, you get 10 of these. Let's see, it's got an odd caliber. Okay, yeah, 356 millimeter. Wanted to make sure I was correct before I said that. But these 10 356 millimeter guns have a 41% chance of causing fires. So the HE is really good. The AP is best mid to close range, but again, if you get in too close, you'll find your health pool evaporating quite quickly, especially if you are outnumbered. So I would say King George V plays best mid to perhaps somewhat long range. Artillery is 18.2, so when you get spotter planes, so you can of course extend that out, but you kind of want to be playing less than 18 for sure. So all right, so let's look over the modules real quick briefly. So you have 3 module upgrades. So you have upgrade on the hull. That gives you improved survivability, A, defense, and maneuverability, hull B. And then our gunfire control system gets you out of that 16.5 to the 18.2. And then the engine, you get propulsion upgrade from 100,000 to 110,000 horsepower at that 28 knot speed. And you can increase this with the Sierra mic flag. Typically when I'm researching modules on a ship first, I always go for the hull upgrade first, because that improves your survivability, which means you're likely to stay in the game a little longer, get a little more damage, get a little more experience, free XP, credits, so on and so forth. So looking over at the consumables real quick, you have your standard damage control party, action time of 15 seconds. Your heal, HP per second, 363. Then consumable action time, 28 seconds, reload time, 60 seconds. You get 4 without taking a commander skill. Then you get the choice between spotting aircraft and fighter. It can be really up to you if you're seeing a lot of CVs in the day. Maybe you equip fighter. Myself, I tend to just go with spotting aircraft so far in my experience with this line. So let's start talking about the upgrade, shall we? So first slot, you get 3 options. You have the main armaments modification 1, auxiliary armaments modification 1, and magazine modification 1. You can see I have equipped the main armaments modification 1. What this does is it reduces the risk of main battery from becoming incapacitated by negative 20%, your main battery survivability plus 50%, main battery repair time negative 20%. So you're keeping your main battery in the game, because if this turret gets knocked out and let's say you're about in, all of a sudden now you only have 2 instead of 6 guns firing front on, or if this one gets knocked out, you only have 4. So my experience is keeping the survivability of the turrets improved is very helpful, especially when we look at the frontal armor, because it's not like an angle that you typically find where just maybe ricochets up, but it's just like it's a wall. So it can be pretty easy to have these knocked out. I believe in yesterday's video, which I'll have linked in the description, showcasing King George V, but also the Duke of York. Duke of York has the same guns. Hello Everybody had his guns knocked out. So taking that, in my opinion, is very good. Auxiliary armaments, really they're just for your AA and your secondary survivability, but I don't think that warrants taking it over main armament modification. And magazine modification 1, what it does is it reduces the risk of your ship's magazine detonating by negative 70%. But if you're going into random, ranked, clan battles, so on and so forth, you will be taking this Juliet Charlie combat signal, which completely eliminates the risk of your ship's magazine detonating. Slot number 2. So you have damage control system modification 1. What this does is it reduces the risk of catching fire by -5% and risk of flooding by -3%. So really good, especially for battleships. Then you have engine room protection. This really is more for cruisers because it basically reduces the risk of your engine or your steering gears from becoming incapacitated, and it improves the repair time if they do get knocked out. But you really want to be reducing your chances of catching fire and flooding in a battleship. So I would definitely recommend the damage control system modification 1. For slot 3, you have 4 options. You have the main battery modification 2. What this does is it improves your main battery traverse speed. I have greased the gears on my Commander right now, and our 180-degree turn time is 37.5 seconds. So if you take that, you'll get down to, I think it's 32 point some seconds. But as long as you're being mindful of the turrets in advance of where you want to have them aimed, it doesn't bother me not having this. You have secondary battery modification 1. King George V is not a brawler. Her secondary battery, though, is at a 5.9 kilometer maximum range, but a pretty long reload time of 6.7 seconds, in my opinion. So the secondaries on this ship are not accurate, nor are you playing them for secondaries. So I advise against strongly taking secondary battery modification 1. Again, you get AA option here. All this does is that the priority A sector preparation time is reduced by -20%. So basically, you can bring that back online sooner. And then you have what I have equipped, the aiming systems modification 1. What this does is increases the firing accuracy of the main battery and secondary battery, accelerates the traverse speed of torpedo tubes, and extends the firing range of the secondary battery. So the only perks we're getting out of this is the main battery and the secondary battery. So on the main battery, your maximum dispersion battery shell is reduced by -7%. So that means your shell grouping of your main battery is tighter. So it means you're more likely to hit the target of where you're aiming at. And then you get the side bonus of the secondary battery firing range being increased by +5%, and the shell dispersion of the secondary battery being reduced by -5%. So I think this is really good just for really that buff that you get with the main battery. Slot 4, you have 4 options. I have equipped the damage control system modification 2. What this does is it accelerates the fire extinguishing and recovery time from flooding by -15%. So if you're burning, if you're flooding, and let's say your DCP is on cooldown, you've used it already, basically this is going to put out the fire and the flood quicker. So you're improving your survivability, improving your tankiness to a certain extent, but the main focus is here with this build is between these 2 modifications, you're improving your survivability. Propulsion modification 1, that's really more for cruisers and destroyers, in my opinion. To me, doesn't really fit very well with King George V because that max speed you're getting is 28 knots without the Sierra Mike flag. You can also reduce your rudder shift time by -20%. Make sure I said that right. Your rudder shift time now, not concealment, maneuverability, is 15 seconds. So, I mean, it could be worse. I mean, the turn stroke radius is 790 meters, which isn't bad, but it could be worse. So I guess modest for the tier. Again, doesn't bother me. I'd rather focus on improving my survivability. And then you get the airstrike modification 1. This is a bit of a newer one within the last few patches. The airstrike armament reload time is reduced by -20%. Aircraft HP, depth charge damage. Basically, it's for this guy, your armament of your depth charge airstrike. Again, I think you should focus more on the ship itself, not the airstrike armament. So let's go ahead and dive into the commander, because we're going to talk about a few more things within the commander build. You can see right now I have a 14-point commander. In yesterday's video, I believe he was not 14-point yet because my concealment was 14.1 and I didn't have the concealment expert. Now I do. So we'll see what that looks like in a moment with the camouflage. But For the 1-point commander, I'd advise taking the gun feeder attack skill. Your main battery reload time right now is 25 seconds. So basically, if you need to switch between shell types, between armor piercing, HE, you're cutting that in half, so 12.5 seconds is quite nice. Yeah, 25 seconds. And then grease the gears, so you get that little buff in your 180-degree turn time, which is 37.5 seconds instead of the standard 45 seconds if you do not have this, which is typical of most battleships. Then for 6-point commander, I'd recommend taking Adrenaline Rush. This enhances ship parameters for each 1% of HP loss. So you can see your main battery reload time, your airstrike reload time, your secondary battery reload time all get reduced by negative 0.2%, and your continuous AA damage goes up by plus 0.2%. So your main battery reload time, you could be shaving that down to 23 seconds as an example, depending on how much health you have lost. Not that you should specifically be focusing on losing health just to get a little bit more use of the Adrenaline Rush, but it's nice to get a few more salvos off maybe before you are closer to dying. For a 10-point commander, it's up to you whether you go with Concealment Expert first or the Fire Prevention Expert. I think if I would go back again, I might take Consumables Expert first over Fire Prevention. I think it just seemed like the season of playing when I was grinding up this line, I just felt like I was burning constantly. So I just took Fire Prevention Expert. So let's talk about this skill first then. So what this skill does, it reduces your risk of catching fire, and the maximum number of fires on a ship is reduced to 3. So your risk of catching fire is negative 10%. And the maximum number of fires is negative 1. And for those of you who have been around long enough catching these videos, you know what I'm about to say. So you can probably like skip 10, 20, 30 seconds forward. So with the Fire Prevention Expert, without that skill, 4 fires are set in your ship. 1 on your bow, 1 on your stern, and 2 on the superstructure. So when you mount Fire Prevention, not only does it reduce your chance of catching fire by negative 10%, it also reduces the number of fires from 4 to 3. But it's where it reduces those number of fires is what's most important. So instead of having 2 fires on your superstructure, you're only going to have max 1 centrally located fire on your superstructure. So 1 fire, 1 fire, 1 fire. So with Fire Prevention mounted, you only have 3 fires. And most players are focusing, when they're HE spamming you, they're focusing on the superstructure. So then, if you have 2 fires burning on your superstructure, you're going to start losing, your health pool is going to start evaporating rather quickly. So Fire Prevention helps reduce the amount of damage you're taking on top of improving your survivability. So that's what Fire Prevention does. That is why I ended up taking it first over Consumables Expert. But if I did things again, I might go for Consumables Expert first because the British line does quite well with Consumables Expert. So with Consumables Expert, let's say 14-point build, your ship detectability range, negative 10%. So right now, without a camouflage mounted, our detectability by sea is 13.1, depths 0 to 9.0, by air 9.0, and then your assured detectability range 2.0. So let's go mount a camouflage. I don't know if I have any British left over. Oh, we do. We got some of these Union Jack. So you can see we dropped down to 12.7, but with this one, you can see it doesn't affect the depths or by air. I believe once you're up till tier 8, let's just switch to Bismarck real quick. You get the access to the 5th slot, Consumables Systems Modification 1, and there you see that the detectability by range, by air, goes down. So you don't get that buff with the commander. So yeah, so 12.7. So it's really nice. So it really helps you disengage, especially if you're fighting more that mid-range, like let's say 10 to 13 kilometers, and the enemy's pushing, you need to get away. You have decent speed and decent concealment to take off. After this, I would recommend as a 18-point build, going for the Emergency Repair Expert. What this does is it improves the action time of the damage control party. So it's your DCP is gonna last a little longer. You have unlimited charges of your damage control party, so it's not a set limit. So when you read the number of damage control party consumables is improved by +1. That's more for the new German battleship line and the Russian battleship line, where they only have a set number of damage control party consumables. But that doesn't matter on the King George or the British battleship line. Your repair parties are going to go up from 4 to 5. And on top of that, your action time of that consumable is going to be plus 10%. So instead of that 28-second repair party consumable action time, I think that's what it was. Yeah, it's going to go up by 10%. So you're looking at 8 seconds, something like that. So you get a little bit additional tick from the repair party. And then after that, I'd recommend going with basics of survivability. Your module restoration time, negative 15% if a module gets knocked out. But your fire extinguishing time and your flooding recovery time are improved or reduced by negative 15%. So it means you're putting out the fires quicker and you're putting out the flooding quicker. So this really, I believe, works quite well with the King George V. So going off of this build, I do want to mention just a few things before I maybe talk about another build possibility option or two. And that comes to the exterior of the ship. Talking about signals. So what signals would I recommend? Well, if you want to be fun with the HE, fire causing chance of causing fire, 41%, you can buff that up to 43% if you take India X-Ray and Victor Lima. So now you have a 43% chance of causing a fire on a target, as you can see in the high explosive shell section. You can also go, this is a very cheap combat signal to purchase in the armory. And basically damage caused by ramming an enemy is plus 50% and damage received when ramming an enemy, negative 20%. So I don't always get to use this in battle, like ramming or someone ramming me, but it's kind of nice to have that. Just overall, maybe you take a battleship with you instead of him just killing you, or you ram a destroyer and you take less damage from ramming him. And then you have this row here, fire extinguishing time, negative 20%. So fires get put out even quicker. Flooding recovery time, negative 20%. And then you get this India Delta combat signal. The damage can be repaired at sea. Amount of HP recovered when the repair party consumable is used, plus 20%, really good. An amount of HP that can be restored within the help of the ship's, the squadron's repair consumable. Not that that matters for the King George V. But it's that 20% buff there that you're getting. And then maybe you go with November Foxtrot, preparation reload time of the ship's consumables, or alternatively, seeing a lot of CVs in the battle, take the November Echo Set 7 combat signal, improves your AA damage. But I would do something like this. Note on the heal, if we go back and look here, it's our HP per second, and now it's 435. Without that mounted, it is 363. So it's really good to take this because you're going to be able to heal back more damage that you've taken, thus extending your time in the battle and improving your survivability. So I want to make a quick note and mention of those combat signals. So again, this is where I've left off in recommending what I plan to take as a 21-point commander on King George V. Would I recommend some other options? Well, I thought about it, but it's actually, to me, it feels rather hard. Because like this whole section, these four here, is more of a brawling build. And Furious is rather interesting. I've seen some people take this on Conqueror, the tier 10 British battleship, because it improves your main battery load time for each fire set on your ship. So then basically you take Furious, but you don't take fire prevention because you want more fires, because the dispersion of even shells fired by enemies attacking your ship is increased, so they're not as accurate guns. But your main battery reload time, imagine having 4 fires on Conqueror and a negative 20-second reload time on your main battery. or, and then you take something like this. I don't know. But we're talking about King George V. And so I think these 4 options are bad. This skill is terrible. I'll get into that in a moment. This really isn't worth it. So it's just like, I have a hard time when I'm looking at things here. Maybe if you're wanting to have an even higher chance of causing fire, if you take this, if I click on it, we go from 43% to 44%. So then add those or 41. If you don't take the combat signals, you go from 41 to 42%. But with combat signals, we go from all the way from 41% to a 44% chance of starting fire. So maybe you drop the gun feeder and instead take this, which I don't necessarily advise. The other thing, you could switch out grease to gears with priority target. But again, I don't necessarily recommend that. Try to be observant as a player. If you're newer, it's going to be more difficult for you, but try to be observant if there's ships targeting you, so on and so forth. It's a really good skill, but if you can go without this skill, I think in the Battleship it's helpful to a certain extent. If this was a brawling battleship, I might be more open-minded to the priority target, but because this is not a brawling battleship, I'm not very open-minded to it. So really, I just feel like this is the build because you can see how much survivability we can improve. Brisk, yes, let's just go ahead and go through and talk about these other skills real quick. So I talked about Demolition Expert. Consumable Specialist, you're only getting the buff of extending the spotting aircraft or the fighter aircraft consumable, the reload time, -10%. So it's not worth it because you're only getting one thing out of the 5 options listed here. Emergency Repair Specialist, if you want to take this and then drop Gun Feeder and take Repair Specialist, you can. It reduces the reload time of the damage control party by -3% and your repair party consumable reload time by -3%. So your damage control party and your repair party are coming back online sooner. So you could take that and drop Gun Feeder if you like. Incoming fire alert. A warning about a salvo fighter at your ship from a distance more than 4.5 kilometers. Usually you see this more on cruisers and destroyers. I don't think it fits so well on King George V. You also have preventive maintenance. It reduces the risk of your main turrets and steering gears and engine from becoming incapacitated in King George V's case. So you could also drop Gun Feeder and pick that up. But again, I like to be able... The reason why I like Gun Feeder so much on King George V is your HE is really good, but the armor piercing gets really good, especially when you get to that medium to close range and you're throwing 10 shells. Especially on a broadside target, the AP does really well. So I like to have the flexibility to be a little bit more of a threat in switching between my main battery loadouts. IFHE, it's you don't cross any like significant thresholds to take this. More what you take this for is like the 6-inch guns. So something like you would find, for example, on the Wooster, because you cross important thresholds there. And cause a lot of damage. Not so much, I would say, for King George V, because it also reduces your chance of causing fires by half. So you go from that 41% to 20.5%. Not cool. You want the fire setting chance. Brisk, increase your ship speed while the enemy ship or while the ship remains undetected. Ship speed plus 10%. You do have good concealment. You see we get it down to 12.7. If you had an engine boost, maybe I could see more worth taking this, but because you don't and your speed's kind of 28 knots already, not so much. You'd be taking this undetected, you'd be getting 30.8 seconds or 30.8 knots in your battleship. Vigilance, it basically what it does extends the torpedo acquisition range even while the hydroacoustic search is active. You don't have hydroacoustic search on King George V. Duke Rework, but again, I like these better just because they're so good. They're so reliable. We talked a little bit about prior target. AA defense and ASW expert, not so much. You're not the AA battleship. I mean, you'll be seeing tier 6 or tier 8 CVs, but there may be some matches you don't have any enemy CVs. So again, this is just a tried and true build I'm showing you. Super heavy AP shields, terrible. It used to be worse, and they made it slightly better, but it's still terrible because your AP shield damage, yeah, gets increased, but your fire extinguishing time and your flooding recovery time take a huge hit, and plus extending the duration of a fire or flood by plus 25%. So just terrible. Do not take this skill. You're not a secondary battleship, so that applies to this skill and that applies to this skill. Talked about these two. Improved repair party readiness. No, because this is so much better than improved repair partiness readiness. What it does is the reload time gets a little bit of comes back online quicker. But I don't like it. It doesn't make much sense because these two, in my opinion, are just way better than what I could vouch for the improved repair party readiness. Focus fire training. Airstrike, armament reload time, negative 10%. Again, you're just buffing your AA and the airstrike armament. Nah, it's really building a ship around something that it's not necessarily all about, I think is not the way to go. Because, again, we can improve our survivability and we can improve how much we're going to last into the game. So there's a lot of defense skills going on here rather than attack skills like the adrenaline rush. So yeah, no. Fury's we talked about that. Close quarters combat increases the reload speed of the main battery after an enemy has been spotted within the firing range of your ship's secondary battery. Main battery reload time, negative 10%. So that means I would have to get within, right now, 5.9 kilometers to use this. This is more of a brawling battleship skill, and King George V does not fit in that category. And we talked about these skills. So yeah, this would be what I would recommend for King George V. So with that, I think we wrap up here with what we want to talk about. I definitely was trying to get this video under 30 minutes today, so it seems we have reached that goal. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you did not, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you are subscribed, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And let me know in the comments what you take on your King George V. So until next time, take care.